You are standing inside the Roman Colosseum. The sun is burning overhead. 50,000 people are screaming. The sound is so loud it shakes your chest. Below you, the sand is dark and wet with blood. A man raises his sword. The crowd wants death. Somewhere above, a thumb turns down. This is how we are taught to imagine Roman justice. Quick, loud, public, violent. A test of strength. Fight well, and maybe you live. Fight poorly, and you die. But here is the truth that almost no one tells you. For most people condemned by Rome, the arena never came. No crowd. No roar. No final moment under the sun. Instead, there was another punishment. One far away from Rome. One hidden underground. One so slow and so complete that the Romans themselves called it a living death. A punishment where you were not killed. You were erased. Your name vanished from records. Your family was taken from you. Your body was worked until it broke. Not in minutes. Not in hours. But over months. Over years. In darkness so deep you would forget what daylight felt like. While the Colosseum entertained, this other system powered the empire. The coins in Roman hands. The marble in Roman temples. The weapons in Roman armies. All of it came from places where condemned people were sent to disappear. Places where screams could not be heard. Places where death was not an event, but a process. Once you understand what happened there, you will never look at Roman greatness the same way again. Because the most terrifying part is not what Rome did. It's how calmly, legally, and efficiently they did it. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Before we go any deeper, we need to clear something away. Almost everything you think you know about Roman punishment is shaped by a lie. Not a deliberate lie. A comfortable one. When people imagine Roman cruelty, one image always appears first. The Colosseum. The arena. Gladiators under the hot sun. Swords clashing. The crowd screaming for blood. Life or death decided in a single moment. It feels brutal, but it also feels simple. There is a beginning. There is a fight. There is an end. This is the version of Roman justice we are shown in movies, books, and documentaries. It is dramatic. It is visual. And most importantly, it is easy to understand. But it is not the whole truth. For the Romans, the arena was not the main tool of punishment. It was not even the most feared one. It was only the most visible. The real system worked quietly. Far from Rome. Far from crowds. Far from history books. The arena was for spectacle. It was meant to be seen. It was meant to entertain, to warn, to shock. But Rome did not rule the world through spectacle alone. An empire cannot survive on drama. It needs structure. It needs efficiency. It needs systems that work day after day, year after year. And Roman justice was exactly that. A system. When a Roman judge passed a sentence, they were not asking, how do we make this person suffer? They were asking, how does this person still serve the state? This is the first idea we must understand. To Rome, punishment was not about morality. It was not about forgiveness. It was not about change. It was about control. When we think of prison today, we often think about time. Years served. Sentences completed. The idea that someone might return to society. The Romans did not think this way at all. For them, Prison was not a place to stay. It was a place to wait. You waited to be executed. You waited to be sold. Or you waited to be sent somewhere much worse. Rome had no interest in keeping people locked up for long periods. Feeding prisoners cost money. Guarding them cost time. And dead prisoners produced nothing. Rome wanted value. That value could come from fear, or from entertainment, or from labor. The arena gave fear and entertainment. But labor? Labor came from somewhere else. When a Roman citizen or subject was condemned for certain crimes, especially serious ones, the punishment was not death. It was something the Romans considered far more useful. They took away your legal identity. The moment the sentence was spoken, you were no longer a person in the eyes of the law. Your rights were gone. Your name stopped mattering. Your future was decided without your consent or consideration. You were not being punished so you could learn. You were being repurposed. From that moment on, your body belonged to the state. And the state had very specific plans for it. There was a moment in Roman law that mattered more than any sword. It was not loud. It was not dramatic. There was no crowd watching. But once it happened, your life was already over. When a Roman judge pronounced the sentence that condemned someone to forced labor, something very specific occurred. You were not just punished. You were reclassified. In a single legal act, you stopped being a human being. The Romans had words for this. Cold, official words. Words that sounded clean and orderly, but hid something terrifying underneath. Your citizenship was taken away. Instantly. If you were married, that marriage was ended without discussion. If you had children, they were no longer legally yours. You could not protect them. You could not inherit anything from them. You could not leave them anything either. Your property was seized by the state. Your home was no longer your home. Everything you owned became government property. You could not make decisions. You could not sign contracts. You could not even write a will. Legally, you were already dead. Roman legal scholars wrote about this openly, without emotion. They explained that those condemned to this punishment lost their freedom and citizenship before they even arrived at the place where they would suffer. The journey itself did not matter. You were already erased. The Romans even had a term for what you became. You were no longer called a person. You were called the condemned. Not a man. Not a woman. A thing. In the eyes of the law, you had the same status as a tool. Like a hammer. Like a plow. Like a rope. You existed to be used. This idea is difficult to accept today, but to the Romans it made perfect sense. Their society was built on strict categories. Citizen and non-citizen. Free and enslaved. Useful and disposable. Once you crossed that legal line, there was no going back. And here is the part most people never think about. Execution ends a life. This punishment ended everything else first. Your social existence. Your family ties. Your future. Your memory. You were not meant to be remembered. The Romans did not want your name to survive. They did not want stories about you. They did not want sympathy. They wanted silence. This is why we know so little about the people who suffered this fate. Not because it was rare, but because it was designed to leave no trace. The system worked best when no one talked about it. And yet, thousands upon thousands of people were sentenced this way. Common thieves. Political enemies. Prisoners of war. And, later, religious minorities who refused to obey the state. Once sentenced, there was no public execution. No final words. No closure. Instead, there was a journey. A long one. A journey in chains, toward places where the ground itself was poisonous and the air was deadly. Places that powered the empire while destroying the bodies sent to work them. The Romans did not call these places prisons. They called them mines. And once you were sent there, the law no longer cared how long you lived. It only cared how much you produced before you died. The punishment did not begin in the mines. It began on the road. Once sentenced, you were not given time to prepare. There were no goodbyes. No last meals. No final moments with family. You were chained where you stood. Iron rings were locked around your ankles and neck. Heavy enough to slow you. Heavy enough to remind you with every step that escape was impossible. Then you were connected to others. A line of condemned people, bound together like animals, forced to move as one body. Old and young. Strong and weak. Sick and healthy. All tied to the same fate. And then the march began. If you were sentenced in Rome and sent to the mines in Spain, the journey could stretch over hundreds of miles. Weeks of walking. Sometimes months. Always in chains. The guards did not care how fast you moved. They did not care if you were injured. They did not care if you were sick. They did not care if your feet bled. If you fell behind, you were pulled forward. If you collapsed, you were beaten. If you could no longer stand, you were killed where you lay. Your body was not worth saving. Rome had already decided you were replaceable. Ancient historians recorded that entire groups arrived at the mines with far fewer people than they had started with. 30% gone. Sometimes more. Dead on the road. Buried nowhere. Remembered by no one. Those who survived the march arrived already broken. Their bodies were weak. Their spirits were crushed. They had learned an important lesson before ever touching a tool. No one was coming to help them. The first thing you noticed when you arrived was the smell. It was impossible to escape. Burning oil from lamps. Human waste. Rotting flesh. Sweat soaked into stone. The sharp, metallic scent of blood mixed with sulfur rising from the earth. Many new arrivals vomited immediately. Then you saw the workers. Men and women who no longer looked human. Their backs bent in unnatural ways. Their limbs thin and trembling. Their skin scarred, burned, and covered in dust. Some coughed constantly. Others stared blankly, their eyes empty, as if something inside them had already died. These were not people serving a sentence. These were people being consumed. The Romans did not hide this reality from themselves. Writers who visited the mines described workers who were forced to labor day and night without rest. The sick were not spared. The weak were not helped. Blows replaced encouragement. Pain replaced motivation. You worked until you collapsed. And if you collapsed too often, you disappeared. This was not cruelty by accident. It was cruelty by design. The journey had already taught you that your life had no value. The mines would reinforce that lesson every single day. Because once you entered the darkness below ground, you would understand the truth. The road had only prepared you. The real punishment was still waiting. The moment you descended into the mine, the world changed. The sky disappeared first. Then the air. Then the sense of time. You were lowered deep into the earth, sometimes hundreds of feet down, through narrow shafts carved into stone. The light from above vanished quickly, replaced by small oil lamps that barely pushed back the darkness. Those lamps were your only sun. They flickered constantly, filling the tunnels with smoke that burned your eyes and lungs. The air was thick, heavy, and hard to breathe. Every breath felt like work. The heat was unbearable. Underground temperatures often climbed higher than anything experienced above ground. Combined with humidity, it crushed the body. Sweat poured from you within minutes. Men collapsed after only a few hours, their bodies unable to cool themselves. There was no escape from it. You worked chained to others, always aware that your movements were no longer your own. Every step had to match the group. Every swing of a tool had to be coordinated. The chains served more than one purpose. They stopped escape, yes, but they also ensured efficiency. If one person slowed down, everyone felt it. If one person fell, others were pulled with them. And if the tunnel collapsed, more than one person would die at once. The Romans understood this. They knew the mines were unstable. They knew cave-ins were common. They accepted it as part of the system. When tunnels collapsed, there were no rescue efforts. No digging. No hope. That section of the mine was sealed off, and work continued elsewhere. The earth became a tomb. You were given simple tools. A small hammer. A pick. Sometimes nothing but your hands. Your daily quota was impossible. The amount of stone demanded required strength no starving body could sustain. Failure was punished. Beatings were routine. Pain was used as fuel. Exhaustion was ignored. If you slowed down, blows reminded you to continue. The air itself was killing you. Dust filled your lungs. Tiny particles of stone settled deep inside, turning breathing into agony over time. You began to cough. Then cough blood. Slowly, your lungs hardened from within. There is a disease where the lungs become stiff, unable to expand. People drown while still breathing. Many prisoners reached this stage within 2 years. Others never lasted that long. Fire was used to crack rock faces. Stone was heated until it glowed, then shocked with cold water. The rock shattered, but so did the tunnels holding it up. Collapse followed collapse. Bones found in ancient mines tell the story. Spines crushed. Limbs twisted. Skeletons still in chains, tools frozen in their hands, buried exactly where they fell. Above ground, Rome prospered. Below ground, people vanished. And yet, even in this place, something remained. A small, quiet resistance. Scratches on walls. Marks carved into stone. Lines counting days. Proof that someone was still trying to remember themselves. Rome recorded almost everything. Taxes. Laws. Buildings. Victories. But there was one group they recorded as little as possible. The condemned. Their disappearance was not a mistake. It was intentional. Once someone was sentenced to this living death, their name stopped mattering. They were removed from public life so completely that even their suffering became invisible. No statues. No memorials. No official histories. And yet, fragments survived. Small pieces of humanity that Rome failed to destroy. In some mines, archaeologists have found words scratched into stone walls. Simple words. Weak letters carved with tired hands. One message, found deep underground, says only this: remember us. Just 2 words. No name. No explanation. No date. Just a plea sent forward through time. In other places, tally marks were found. Lines carved into rock, one by one. Someone was counting days. or weeks, or maybe the number of times the sun rose above a world they could no longer see. One set of marks ends suddenly. We do not know why. Perhaps the person died. Perhaps they were buried in a collapse. Perhaps they simply lost the strength to care. This is what erasure looks like. We know that not everyone sent to the mines was a criminal in the way we think of criminals today. Some were political enemies. People who had spoken against the wrong official. People who were connected to someone Rome wanted to silence. Others were prisoners of war. Conquered people turned into labor. And then there were the religious. As Christianity spread through the empire, many believers refused to honor the Roman gods or the emperor. For Rome, this was not just belief. It was disobedience. Some Christians were sent to the arena, but many more were sent to the mines. Early Christian writers described this punishment as death stretched across years. They wrote letters to people underground, knowing they would never see them again. One writer told those condemned that the world already considered them dead, but that they were still alive in ways Rome could not control. It was not comfort. It was survival. And then there were the children. Yes, children. Roman law allowed entire families to be condemned together. Wives, sons, daughters, even infants. Archaeological evidence shows children as young as 8 or 9 working underground. Their bones tell the same story as the adults. Deformed spines, broken joints, signs of starvation. A child growing up in chains. Learning to work before learning to read. Knowing only darkness, pain, and commands shouted in a language of violence. This was not rare. It was legal. It was normal. And the most disturbing part is this: the system worked exactly as intended. The mines produced silver, gold, iron, copper, and marble. Materials that fed the empire. Materials that built temples, roads, aqueducts, and weapons. Every beautiful structure rested on unseen suffering. The people who paid the price were meant to be forgotten. But they left marks. And those marks refused to stay silent. When people think of Roman punishment, they still think of noise. The roar of the crowd. The clash of weapons. The moment of death beneath an open sky. But that noise was never the heart of the system. The heart of Roman justice was quiet. It lived far from Rome, deep underground, where screams could not travel and names could not survive. While citizens watched games and admired monuments, something else was happening out of sight. People were disappearing. Not in moments. Not in spectacle. But slowly. This was not chaos. It was organization. The Roman Empire depended on resources. Silver for coins. Gold for temples. Iron for weapons. Lead for pipes. Marble for monuments. None of these things appeared by accident. They came from mines spread across the empire. Spain, Greece, Egypt, North Africa. Remote places where the state could send people and never see them again. When the empire needed more metal, more people were condemned. When new quarries opened, sentences increased. This was not rumor. Ancient writers mentioned it casually. One historian noted that so many people were sent away that it affected Rome's population. He did not express shock. He did not argue against it. To him, it was just administration. That is what makes this system so unsettling. The Romans did not see themselves as cruel. They saw themselves as civilized. They believed in law, order, and progress. They built roads and cities. They created legal systems that still influence the world today. And at the same time, they legally declared human beings to be objects. They convinced themselves that some lives were tools, resources, necessary costs of greatness. This is not a story about monsters. It is a story about people. People who made careful decisions. People who wrote laws. People who adjusted policies when something worked better. People who chose silence because silence was efficient. The arena was public. It was emotional. It was expensive. The mines were private. They were profitable. And they did not create sympathy. That is why, later in the empire, judges preferred this punishment. Not because it was kinder, but because it was quieter. Victims did not become martyrs in front of crowds. They vanished. And while they vanished, they worked. The empire grew rich. The monuments rose. And beneath it all, thousands of unnamed lives were ground into the earth. When you look at Roman ruins today, you see stone that survived time. But beneath that stone are stories that almost didn't. People who counted days in darkness. People who scratched words into walls. People who wanted only one thing: to be remembered. The Colosseum still stands. Tourists take pictures. They marvel at Roman power. But the mines remain mostly forgotten. Abandoned holes. Broken tunnels. Occasional bones still wrapped in rusted chains. That silence is the real legacy. Because history is not only made by what is preserved. It is also shaped by what was erased. And when a civilization decides that some people are not really people, it is not just destroying them. It is building something that cannot stand forever. Empires fall. But the silence they leave behind speaks long after the crowds are gone.